Congresswoman, thanks so much for having us here in DC and being able to sit down with us and talk about the issues happening with you in DC as well. Talk about what's been happening since January. A lot's been going on up here, and you've been involved pretty heavily with that.
Yes, well, I'll try to go down a timeline. One of the things that we worked on, there were 12 human trafficking bills that passed out of the House of Representatives that have comparable bills in the Senate that will move through the Senate process, and I feel very strongly will be signed into law in North Carolina. That is a huge issue that unfortunately many do not even realize is happening in their own backyards, in our own communities. Human trafficking is very real. And so I'm very, very happy to say that we had a bill that actually addressed the medical community and the ability to educate those who are seeing patients in our community health centers, in our hospitals, in our doctor's offices that can be human trafficked, and addressing that issue. We also have moved forward on some breast cancer legislation. We had a very good bill that moved through the House, went through the Senate process, and now is law, protecting our young breast cancer survivors and helping them to get the health care needs that they have. In energy and commerce, we're working on 21st Century Cures that continues to move forward, and it's a great bipartisan effort to help healthcare in this country, to actually bring down the cost of healthcare within the system itself, get drugs through the FDA process quicker, and address issues like vaccines, which is a very real issue and affecting North Carolinians and those across the country. Before we left to be back in our districts for the last 2 weeks, we passed a huge budget initiative. This budget will balance in 10 years. It cuts $5 trillion of spending. But again, and one of the big issues for us back in District 2 is the military and funding the military at the levels that we need to make sure are sustainable. And we also passed a huge Medicare reform bill repealing the SGR formula, or the sustainable growth rate formula, that was the reimbursement mechanism for physicians. It just simply was a formula that did not work. And over, about a 15-year period of time, we spent about 170 billion extra taxpayer dollars just addressing that issue by patching it and just, kicking it down the way. It was a huge bipartisan effort. Passed the House with 392 to 37, I believe, and something that we're very proud of. So we're going to continue to work on those issues, again, addressing, spending at the federal level. We're going to address issues like education into the future, many things that so many of the North Carolinians that I speak to, especially back in District 2, are concerned about.
Representing the Fort Bragg and Fayetteville area, you've got the VA hospital there. That is a big
Yes.
topic with the wait times.
Mm-hmm.
How is that being looked at and addressed as well here?
Well, there again, as you know, especially the Fayetteville VA is subjected to this, and the wait times are an issue. I think one of the main issues that we have recognized is that the growth of veterans in North Carolina is higher, four times the national average. So this is an issue that needs to be addressed from the top down. I think that our Fayetteville VA is doing everything they can to address this issue with a plan of action of both a short-term and a long-term plan. I feel that they're very committed to this. I believe it really, the problem lies with the national level. It just is not simply a one-size-fits-all issue, and I think the VA needs to look at each individual region and address the needs of those regions and the funding along with it.
With funding in the military, there's a sequestration, there's the budget cuts that are asked for, but yet we're also trying to find ways to salvage the military we do have and try to find spending that will cover that, or at least appropriations that will cover that, including the 440th
Right.
Airlift Wing as well. How do we balance that cuts need with the serving our troops needs?
Well, and I think this is, there again, it gets right back to the heart of the issue that we started talking about with, addressing the 440th. These are budgetary issues that have happened over time. I think the Air Force, I think all of our military will tell you that the military of 20 years ago is not the military we have today. They have had to streamline and do more with less. And I think they're doing a wonderful job with that. But at the same time, I think we do have to be smart. And I think many of us here in Washington, especially in the House of Representatives, recognized that we just simply cannot continue to cut our military. And the issue of sequestration, of course, came up with the 2016 budget. And we felt very strongly that we have to increase those numbers. What we've funded the military is even higher than what the president asked for, because we feel very strongly that it's time to act. We are living in a more dangerous world than ever, and we need that military readiness and that training and that availability. And that's why it's so important to Fort Bragg.
It leads right into the national issues happening. We have ISIS to deal with, the Russians working with the Iranians possibly on reopening up missile trades again. Talk about that type of the issues facing the country now.
Absolutely. There again, national defense being our number one issue. I had the opportunity to attend a classified briefing yesterday, and I'll tell you, I left very concerned. I am not in favor of the plan moving forward that Senator Kerry is heading up and the president supports. I think that it's, again, just a very short-sighted view of what needs to happen. I think we have to make sure that those sanctions remain in place. I think we need to do everything we can to put pressure on Iran and not simply assume that this is just a diplomatic issue. And I'm afraid that the approach that's being taken right now, again, is just not strong enough. I think we need to do everything we can to ensure the safety of every American, especially those who are serving, around the world. I think we have to do everything we can to protect our allies, and we can't take that lightly. We have to do everything we can to be strong against Iran and taking all things into consideration.
And ISIS is still always a continuing threat right now.
A growing threat.
How is that also being looked at and also worked on? Budget comes into play always when you deal with any kind of extra issues happening. Is this a part of the budget to take care of that and continue to make that?
Well, I think many of us feel very strongly that, again, I think that when we're dealing with all of these entities, we have to do everything we can to maintain the image that the American people and America itself is the strongest force in the world. And we measure some weakness with the president and the president's message, especially when we're dealing with radical Islam. And we need to do everything we can to protect Israel, to make sure that our American interests are protected around the world. And there again, ISIS is a threat to that. So the message has to be strong. The message has to be to move forward, again, funding our military at the level that they need to be funded at in order to carry out their missions. And I think this is also a very strong message that we're sending around the world. Believe me, they're watching. And everything that we do here in the United States, especially at a political level, is something that they're taking note of. And we need to be strong on all of these issues.
Recently, Israel was represented here.
Yes.
You guys had to have the speaking right there in Congress. How was that important, and why was that important to have that direct message?
Well, I did attend, the joint session hearing Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, and there again, I think his message of strength is so important for us. It helps us to focus and guide us as we're looking at these issues into the future. It can't just be rhetoric that we are Israel's support. We have to make sure that we are actually making sure that there are results that are being shown there. And I think that the ability for him to come have that conversation with us, for us to be able to stand together, is just very, very important. And there again, we again have to do everything we can to make sure Israel knows we are with them, we are standing strong, and we are protecting them. They are the biggest target, or I should say the littlest target, I guess, when you think about it. They just have enemies surrounding them, and we need to be strong with them.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.